Ready, ladies? All right, we'll call to order this meeting of the East Hampton Planning Board for Tuesday, August 16th, 2016. Is there anybody here to speak to anything that is not on the agenda for tonight? All right, moving right along, we've got some meeting minutes. June 21st, 2016. Did everyone have a chance to look at those?
Yep.
Any changes, corrections, anything of that nature?
Sure you get the quorums correct, I think.
Right.
They're different.
So Libby and Chet were not here for this one.
No.
So Harry, Jim, anything?
I motion to approve the minutes from June 21st, 2016.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
And Chet, you too. All right, and minutes from July 19th, 2016. Chet was the only one missing from that one.
Right.
I had a couple missing words. There was one on the A&R, but I can
Mark it up.
marked it up and I can hand it over.
Okay.
Jessica was taking minutes then.
She did a great job.
And working at the same time with us,
Yes.
so a difficult
Yeah,
time.
she can make excuses.
Thank you. I was going to say, thanks for covering me, but forget it, Harry.
I motion to approve the minutes from July 19th
I would expect no
with
less.
minor word changes coming from Jesse.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And Chet abstains again.
Yes.
All right. Moving on, an A&R for Todd Potaski, 63 Highland Avenue. Someone here to speak to that?
I can speak to it if you
Okay.
want to open the plan. It's pretty
Sure.
pretty self-explanatory. There's no change to the frontage. There's just there's an encroachment of a shed, and so they're just cleaning up the lot lines to accommodate for the shed that's encroaching. So that's the only change. It's minor in the towards the back.
Very slow here. Oh, so it's just this teeny little square back here with the
Small
shed?
little square in the back. Yep.
Okay.
No frontage involved.
That's it.
Yeah.
So the line was
That
here.
little thing.
And it's coming from here and going here?
It's coming from here and going to there.
Going
There's
there.
a pending sale on the property, so that's why they're cleaning up the lot lines.
It's going here and this is?
This is going to parcel A. Wait a minute. You know what? Take the Mylar off because it makes that weird. So this remains. This goes with, I believe, this one.
That one,
Yeah.
not
Yep,
that
this
one.
one,
To
this,
include
not
the
this.
shed,
Yep,
yeah.
to include the shed.
Okay.
All right.
And so it doesn't impact the frontage on either of them?
Doesn't, no frontage issues, nothing.
Okay.
The rear line switch.
Good.
Does anyone have any questions? I motion to endorse the A&R for Todd Potaski at 63 Highland Ave.
I'll second that.
Okay, you can second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right. How many am I signing, Jessica?
Oh, you ask me this every time.
I
I
know.
have to think about it. Mylar to the applicant, copy to the applicant, copy to the planning department, copy to the city clerk. So I need 3 signed. And then I need the other copies don't need signatures, but I'll drop those to the city engineer and the assessor's office.
There aren't many uncomfortable silences on the planning board.
Talk amongst yourselves. All right.
That's it.
All right. Next up, new business special permit for 198 Park Street, and I'm going to recuse myself from this matter, so Jim, you can take over. I'm going to hide in the back room. Come get me when I'm done.
All right, can I ask why?
Williston is a firm client of mine, so it's easier to just step back.
All right, we'll be talking about a special permit application from 198 Park Street and Dynamic Energy Solutions. Is there anyone here to speak to that? Come on up. Let us know your name and where you're from, please.
evening. My name is Mark Reed from Heritage Surveys, Inc., 241 College Highway, Southampton. I have here tonight Chuck McCullough, and Jeff Tannett from Williston, as well as John Perry from Dynamic Energy. And we are here before you for a special permit application for a proposed 650 kilowatt solar system, which is going to be located on a parcel of land that abuts White Brook Middle School. And we have a set of plans that I'd like to run through with you. So the first sheet is an existing conditions plan, and being Park Street on the westerly side of the property at the intersection of South. The access road to White Brook Middle School is to the south of the property, and White Brook Middle School is about where I'm standing now in relationship to the site itself. This was known as the old Davies property. The past owners, Williston, acquired this 5.17 acre parcel of land from them and is proposing to construct a solar array system on the property itself. We have received permission, or through a request for determination of applicability from the Conservation Commission for the project. So the Conservation Commission has already approved the project for this. There are some wetlands at the rear of the property. They're kind of outlined in the blue areas. And then there's 3 isolated wetlands that aren't regulated under the State Wetlands Protection Act, but they're regulated under the federal wetlands located on the property. Sheet 2, which is known as SP1, shows the property, and in orange are a series of rows of solar panels that would be constructed on the property. The face of the panels would be towards White Brook Middle School, so if you're standing on the access drive to the school, you would see the face of the panels, this being south, and the upper edge of the panels, of course, being on the north side where the sun doesn't shine on this side. So what we are proposing is kind of an irregular shape configuration of the panels, because we are honoring a 50-foot urban zone from all the wetlands, state regulated wetlands, worked out through the Conservation Commission. We are also not encroaching on any of the 3 federally regulated wetlands, so there's no work being proposed in those 3 areas at all. The chain link fence would go around those areas, so there's no encroachment of them, and they would remain in their current condition. The site would be, excuse me, the site would have a 6-foot high chain link fence around the perimeter of it. And then, as you can see, a series of rows of panels with a 10-foot separation between them, so that it can access for mowing of the grass and maintaining them. The site in itself is really conducive to the placement of the panels, because from Park Street being the highest point on the property, the land slopes towards the rear of the property down to these 2 low areas, and then further down to White Brook, which is on the city-owned property down in this area here. So there is no major earth moving. The topography of the land will remain the same. The panels would just be placed on I-beam posts in a racking system that is part of the application that we submitted. These I-beam posts are like you would have for a guardrail post that you would see. They'd be driven into the ground, approximately 10 to 12 feet in the ground for stability's sake, coming up through a post and then a racking system with the panels being attached to them along the way through that. So there's very little land disturbance associated with that. The city engineer had some comments that I sent an email earlier this afternoon, and I have hard copies of them, or a response to them.
Before we look at the comments, and I really do want to go through that, can you show me where, isn't there a shed in there too?
Yeah, and I could talk about sheds. So I just wanted to give you these. I got hard copies of this for each member. One for Jessica.
Thank you.
So also a component of this is there will be a shed, a 12 by 20 shed that's located in the front of the property. We're going to maintain the existing driveway that comes into the property. The existing driveway is outlined in the gray, comes into here. We have a 50-foot setback from Park Street to the fence. The regulation,
Shed is in the fence?
what's that?
Shed is inside
Inside the fence. The shed is inside the fence. Your regulations call for a 50-foot setback from the street to the solar array, but we've gone one step further and kept it just to the fence with the solar panels even further away from Park Street in itself. The shed will be for the maintenance of it, but we'll have a slight educational component, which we addressed in our letter. Approximately 4 to 6 times a year, they'll bring some students up to this area from Williston in one of their small vans that fit 14 people in it, and give them an educational component on the ground. The nice thing about this is that this whole system can be monitored from off-site, so it can be part of the monitoring system at the school. Williston is working with the City of East Hampton school system for educational programs for the schools, so that they're planning on setting up monitors within Whitebrook and other schools so that East Hampton school children can learn about the solar component of it and kind of track how it's functioning. So it's really, you know, a shed used for that purpose, but, you know, 4 to 6 times a year there may be a group of students coming up there and taking a look physically on the ground. So there'll be a gate constructed right here so that you pull off of Park Street into the site. You can open the gate and access the maintenance vehicles. If students are going to the site, there's really not enough room on the site to bring the small bus in, so that they would park on Park Street or the access road, let the children out. The bus would let them out, leave the site, they'd have their class, and then come back and pick them up. So there's really, you know, the on-site parking is really for maintenance vehicles. We want to make it as green as possible. All the vegetation that is out there now, we want to maintain as lawn, or not lawn, but as a field, a meadow, which it is today. There is a stand of trees, kind of better shows up maybe on this plan, of 10-inch silver maples in this area that would have to be cut. And then throughout the site, there's some scattered trees that would have to be cut within the enclosure of the fence. We're not proposing to cut any of the trees within the tree belt of Park Street and or within the 50-foot setback, with the exception of 4 trees, 2 of which are dead, at the intersection, or the corner of the property between the school and Park Street, for overhead poles and the connection, physical connection to an existing pole that's located right here. And there's a rendering in the information I just gave you that shows a perspective from Park Street looking at the project for that, and it's an updated rendering. Yes. So that is, if you were standing across the street looking kind of diagonal into it, you'll see there's one existing pole and then 3 new poles associated with the requirements from Eversource to make a connection with the property in itself. The last sheet is a typical section and has some details, construction-related details, relative to setback requirements from the bordering vegetated wetlands and the isolated wetlands on the property. The entire construction fence around it, or the fence around it, will be surrounded with silt fence during construction for erosion control and to meet all the standards. And there's some relative notes for erosion control and seeding if needed. There will be some removal of soils because of some stumps potentially on the property, very minor amount of disturbance for that. I also included in the information I just gave you some existing conditions photos of the site, which if you scroll through there's quite a few, but I tried to give you a good concept of what the property looks like now, and you can see from Park Street vantage point, the driveway coming in to the site, the small parking area you'll see on the 4th page. There's 3 vehicles parked there when we were out there, and then the overall site itself, and really from about here back, it's just a meadow, overgrown meadow with ragweed and everything so-called. In this entire portion of the property, we're not proposing to do anything. The vegetation would remain the same, and as it exists today, we are working on 2 replication areas that are shown on the plan that have to do with some requirements from the Conservation Commission for the cross-country course that Wilson is constructing off of Taft Avenue of Gabbers Field. So there's going to be increased wetland areas here that we're going to be constructing, and we've honored that additional buffer for that 50-foot buffer from that as part of that component of that project. So within the boundaries of the chain link fence, it's only 2.54 acres of land that's going to be part of this solar array, and out of the 5.18 acres of the property boundaries. We are asking for setback waivers from the side property line, rear property line, and the northerly property line. And within the application and the information that we provided today, we have 3 letters of support for that waiver request. The 2 abutters to the north, the Kavanaughs and the Mrs. Tiffany, have expressed and signed letters of support for the project, so that those are in the original application. We also have a letter that's in the information I just handed you from the school superintendent supporting the waiver request for that abuts the school property. So that's within your packet of information. So we are asking for that setback waiver.
For the
And
record, can you say how much?
I'm sorry, what?
It's 50 foot normally, and you're looking for a waiver too.
Yes, so we're looking for a waiver to go down to 5 feet with the fence, and then there's an additional 10 feet to the panels. So it's about 15 feet to the actual panels. So it's about 35-foot reduction in that 50 foot.
So from, say, the access road to White Brook, the fence would be 5 feet from the road.
Correct. Not from the road, from the property line. As you can see,
It's a little
this is the
further.
sidewalk,
Got it.
all right, and the boundary line or the property line is up here.
Okay.
So the town owns a grass area between the sidewalk and our property. So it's a little bit deceiving. The closest point to the sidewalk is at this back corner here. The rest of it, I can scale it, it averages from the existing sidewalk of White Brook, it is about 28 feet there. Almost 50 here.
Okay.
So it, from the actual sidewalk that currently exists.
Some more quick questions before we go into the comments from the that you made to the before you go to the comments.
Sure.
How tall are the arrays? How high off the ground?
So the backside, the highest side, are 8 feet
Approximately 8 feet.
from the top.
Yep.
And the bottom side is about 3 feet off the ground.
Okay.
So it averages to 3 feet at the low end, 8 feet on the top.
5 total. And what's the foundation for the shed?
The shed is just gonna be put on gravel. It's not a permanent structure, so we'll put stone down and put blocks, cinder blocks up to keep it off the ground. There's no poured concrete, it's not a permanent structure
Right.
for that at all. The other comment I want, or point I wanted to make is a request from the Conservation Commission that the fence, chain link fence that goes around the property, which will be black chain link fence. That was a question of the school department. This black wire chain link. That the bottom of the fence be 6 inches off the ground to allow for wildlife habitat movement under the fence.
Yeah.
From this area. So that is a condition that we are going to adhere to. So the bottom of the fence will be 6 inches off this ground surface so that wildlife can move underneath it.
Is that just in certain sections or all the
No,
way?
the entire fence. The entire fence.
It's good to know. I was curious about that.
Very good.
And go through the comments from the city engineer?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So the information I just sent out to you, his first question was confirm that no water or sewer will be needed for the proposed shed, and we are not proposing any water or sewer or electricity for that matter. If they need electricity for whatever purpose for maintenance, a generator will be brought in. We're not, like I said, it's real low key. It's not even going to have a monitoring system for the panels in it. It's just mainly.
That brings up a question, and this is just for a layman in this, because I'm certainly no expert in solar energy, but at some point I'm assuming all these panels, there's a collector somewhere for it, and then it's going into those poles I saw at the front, right?
Correct.
Where's the
So
collector?
it's down here. Okay, there's a distribution, it's labeled on the plan. And switching and transformer is located right here on the property, not part of the shed.
What does that look like?
And within the application, John, I think we had a sketch of that.
There should be one line with sketches of the equipment.
Yeah, right.
Dimensional drawings.
Let me find where I have that. It's in the original application, which is probably over here. So this is the racking system.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I thought there was a detail of that.
Is it this?
Yes, there it is.
So
Yep,
it's
thank you.
page 3, I think,
Page
or
three,
4?
right.
4.
Yes. So it's a typical, you know, it's not a big structure or anything like that.
Okay,
It's very-
thank you.
But within the application, you get a better idea of what the actual panels and hardware is, and the racking system that I was speaking to earlier. And it's kind of some good details of that. So no water or power or sewer needed. Again, I spoke about it earlier, how will the access to the site be? So it's going to be through the existing driveway. We're not proposing to change that. In those pictures that show the existing site, there's a current fence closer to Park Street that's going to come down so that somebody that's coming in for maintaining the facility can safely pull off of Park Street. We'll have plenty of room to get off of Park Street because that is a busy intersection. And then open the gate and then drive through.
Will you be keeping the gate as it is?
No, so it's moving back into the new chain.
It'll be a different gate?
Yeah, it'll be a modern chain link fence, part of the whole upgrade to the fencing system.
From what I'm looking at here, it looks like it's paved coming into it and then it turns into dirt beyond the gate. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
it's paved. There's pavement all over to this side here. Where the next photo is where we're parked. We were parked on pavement.
Yeah.
So it is currently paved all the way through there.
How often do you think maintenance will need to occur, and how big will the vehicles for maintenance be?
For as far as dynamic, John, you're talking about twice a year.
Probably twice a year would be a minivan.
I'm sorry, can you just state your,
Yes, my name is John Perry from Dynamic Energy.
thank you.
As far as Williston's concerned, they will be mowing the areas between the panels and around the panels. I would say probably, well, this year's different, but you know, whether they do it once a month or every other month as needed. You know, the intent is that it doesn't have to be manicured grass. It can get to 6-inch height, so once or twice, Jeff, a summer or?
Yeah, and it won't take much.
Right.
So very little traffic.
Right, very little traffic coming in.
Snow removal?
No. I don't see the need for snow removal. If we have a real heavy snow event, like we had 2 years ago, and the panels don't relieve themselves of the snow because of the angle, they go up to 30-degree angle in it. There may be the need of raking, and that's done sometimes, but that's rare because as soon as the sun gets out and warms those black panels, it slides off. So it'd be a rare occasion, but it might happen. It would have to rake the snow off of it. I don't know if you.
It's very unusual.
Yeah.
Because the front edge is 3 feet, so you'd have to have 3 feet of snow, and it's a slippery surface, so it does tend to, maintain itself as far as snow.
Thank you.
The third question is the proposed parking, which is, again, we talked about just maintenance, very low, 4 to 6 times a year with buses that would come that wouldn't be parked on site, they'd be dropping off students, shuttled around, and then the bus would return to pick up the students after they're done with their class for that.
You're saying groups of around 20?
Yeah, I estimated 20. If there's a classroom from Whitebrook Middle School, they're gonna walk from the school up to the site and in there, so you know, their small buses hold 14 people, so if they have, you know, 1 bus come up or 2 buses come up, there might, you know, so guessed at roughly 20. Most of the classes in Whitebrook are probably about 20 students, 20 to 25. The next question was relative to the existing tree and vegetation removal. And like I mentioned, there are 4 trees being proposed to be cut, 2 of them dead. And there's a little detail of that in that application, or that supplemental filings that I did with you. No shade trees, street shade trees will be cut along Park Street. There is 1 street shade tree that's starting to get tired. It's a very large one, but we're not proposing to cut any of them down. There are some smaller trees within the 50-foot buffer zone that are dead or in need of cleaning up, and we're going to propose to do that, but no major tree removal. Along the southerly boundary line, you can see by the pictures, there's a little bit of vegetation that runs right along the property line and on the town's property, and there's an awful lot of invasive vines and sumac along that area. And we had talked about, discussing with the school department about cleaning that up, because it's really, the invasive vines are choking out all the healthy trees. They're just, all those trees that were healthy in this area are just getting choked out with the vines. So it's just a matter of time before they all completely die. And the other thing that we noticed when we're out there is that by removing these 4 trees at the intersection where the new poles are going to go, we're going to improve the site visibility coming out of Whitebrook Middle School, because right now it's difficult to see traffic coming down Park Street to your left, heading down towards Southampton, but looking back towards East Hampton, because of the thick vegetation and the vines, sumac that's growing up in that intersection, we'll be enhancing that to make it a safer intersection.
I want to make sure I understand, and I think it's a great idea of clearing that out of the invasive plants. But you said you were going to work with the school system to do it, and then you said you are going to be doing it. I'm a little confused as to where you're actually going to
We would like to
clear
do
it
it.
out.
We would like to do it to the benefit of the school and to the city. If they don't want it touched,
So it's an
okay.
approval issue from the
Right.
city that
Correct. We would
need
have to
hold
get,
up on. Okay.
yes, we'd have to get the school department approval for any work on the vegetation on their property.
I have a quick question about the trees. Go ahead. You said there was a stand of silver maples that would be removed.
Yes.
Can you speak to what other trees there are in the panel area that would need
Sure.
to be removed? There's species?
There's a 26-inch elm.
That's an American elm.
So that's yes. There are a couple of pine trees, a couple of maple trees. So there's some maple trees back in here. There's some smaller shrubs and bushes there. So it's a variety of pines, this one elm tree, some maple trees, and this stand of silver maples, which are not native to the area. Silver maples are not native to Massachusetts. So we believe that the former owner, because they're pretty much in a row, decided to make a little tree farm back there and bring in some silver maples, but they're not native to Massachusetts or to New England.
Roughly how many?
It's hard to tell. I would, at least 20. I don't know, I never counted them.
Score?
There's probably 30.
30, maybe 40.
Yeah.
2 score. Okay.
Yeah. And they're all, 10 inches in size, but silver maples, they don't grow, the trunks don't grow big, but they are relatively tall. And you can see by the pictures of some of those also.
I'm not a tree expert, but American elms are pretty rare now, right? Because a lot were taken out by Dutch elm disease. And the 26-inch elm, that seems kind of a shame.
Right. Well, unfortunately, because this whole area is been let go for all these years. I mean, there was a barn that had collapsed on the property. The house had burnt down years ago. They're in real.
So there's no way you
shape.
can save that tree in any way?
No, unfortunately, that's right in the middle of the array.
Walk around it.
Right.
Take a little hitch.
Unfortunately.
Most likely, the elms don't last very well, and we try to keep as many on the campus going as we can, but they get to a certain size, and then they die off. We've tried disease-resistant elms and everything else. Some of the newer ones seem to be doing a little better, but most of those trees, by the time they're getting to that size, are pretty well gone anyway.
But this one is healthy.
I'm
It's
not
healthy.
sure it is actually.
Yeah, I would
because
say.
I didn't even recognize it as an elm. It was just something I look for. I've spent tons of time saving one in the backyard where I live on the campus, and so for me to not even to have noticed that it's an elm, I think probably means it's not a real healthy tree. I can't guarantee that, but usually I recognize them. I was just surprised when Mark said this now. Didn't remember seeing one there.
We'll keep that in consideration. Go ahead, please keep going.
I was just trying to see if I had a good picture of it. And you can.
I'd like to see it saved. I think they
It's
can
on
take-
the.
They can take a pen.
It can't be.
Come on, guys, save that
1,
tree.
2, 3, 4, 5th page in. Yeah, you can see it's pretty. It's not a very good picture. I didn't get close enough
Show
to
me
it.
the one you're looking at, please.
It's pretty thin. This bottom one.
Okay.
Underneath. 5th page in. One more. There you go.
All right.
Right, so it's the one back here. That one. You can
Yeah,
see it's
got
pretty
it.
thin.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it. Save the tree. Nice try.
Okay, so where was it? Okay, so the next is the next to the last, on the second page of my letter, response letter, is that the site plan does not show any proposed utilities such as electrical conduits, associated manholes, and what impacts they will have on the site in itself. So if you, there's a fold-out plan within that information that I provided to you, is that all the wiring for the connection between each solar panel is up in the racking system. So it's underneath the bottom of the racking system. So for each row, all that wiring is within that area. And there's a red line that you'll see on the plan. Maybe I can clip it. So there'll be a trench that will connect the most northerly row of panels going down to the southern end of it, and then connecting to the transformer and distribution area on the plan itself. And then in the rear of the property, there's will be a ditch, a conduit buried 2 foot wide, 30 inches deep to meet code for electrical purposes, crossing over and fed it back up into here. So there's very little excavating needed on the site in itself. Then there'll be, from the transformer and distribution switching area here, there'll be underground trenching to the poles that are shown on that rendering. And then it's overhead to the existing pole on Park Street. for that. So that's the only trenching being proposed. And, oops, I gotta take this off because my notes are on, oh, it's right here. So we kind of broke it down for the city engineer questions into how much disturbance we were actually gonna have with this project. So for the concrete pad, which is associated with the transformer and distribution center, or distribution transformer switching, it's 117 square feet of its disturbance. Trenching, which are the red lines on the plan right here, is approximately 1,000 square feet. The posts, because there are the I-beam posts, there are 279 of them, is approximately 156 square feet of land disturbance. And then the utility poles is about 10 square feet of disturbance. And then we estimated that as you're putting in the post, you might hit a stump, especially in the silver maple area here. So we'd have to remove the stumps, so that's gonna disturb some land. So we made an estimate of about 2,000 square feet of disturbance for stumps or other things that might be in our way. So a total of about 3,300 square feet of land disturbance with this entire property. Like I said, we don't need to go in there and bulldoze it flat and change the grades. The posts that we'll be putting in can adjust the height so that the panels will be constructed, and you'll have, you know, a little bit 6 inches more or less in some areas to accommodate that. And they don't have to be flat. The panels, as they go up from one end of the site to the other, can go down and maintain the existing topography, and then level off. The angle of the panels will stay the same, but it can follow the ground contours of the property. So that was part of the response, is about 3,300 square feet of disturbance for the property itself.
Okay.
And then I think lastly, oh, that is the last.
That is the
item.
last,
yeah.
That's the last item.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
You're done.
We didn't have any other department comments, I don't believe, Jessica?
No.
No, I have the ones that you put out, and everyone else said essentially no comment. Do you have anything more you want to add?
No. I can answer any questions, or John, Harry can answer any questions relative to the functionality of the solar.
If you'd like, I'd like to run through board the criteria for a special permit, just to make sure we check off on each list, and then if anyone has any questions that they want to ask the applicant or their representatives. Does that sound okay?
Go through section 7.3
As well,
also.
yeah. Good advice. Why don't we start with that and come to this? How's that sound? Do you want to lead us in that? You took one step forward.
Open my mouth. Okay, let's see.
Where are you at?
So 7.3.0, general requirements for all solar energy facilities. That seems like a place to start.
Try to hit the highlights. So we
Yeah.
don't-
So, let's see. So it says a permit shall be granted unless we find in writing that the specific site is not an appropriate location, that the nuisance is expected to be created by the use, and adequate and appropriate facilities will not be provided for the proper operation and maintenance of the use. So those would be the,
Anyone see any issues with those? Those look like we sail through that.
so then we have compliance with laws, ordinances, and regulations. We're talking about proof of liability insurance is required.
Do you have any insurance for this project?
Yes, Dynamic Energy will carry all Insurance is needed as required, for, and provide that information, or the certificates to the city.
I did have a quick question here I'm going to throw in. You can use this as an
Yes.
advantageous time to read ahead. Well, how dangerous is this? If some kid were to sneak in over the fence, heaven forfend, are there points at which contact could really be dangerous in this?
No, because this has to adhere to the National Electrical Code, so all the terminations have to be protected and insulated. I mean, if you started cutting cables and, but that's any electrical installation.
Okay.
But no, all of the terminations are in enclosures, all of the terminations are, within the inverters, which you'd have to work to be exposed to live conductors.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay, so utility notification, Eversource is aware of the
Yes,
project? I imagine.
they are working with Eversource to obtain all the permits needed for the project.
Okay, great. So 7.3.8 on the next page is design standards. I'm just hitting the highlights.
Right.
So lighting, is there any lighting?
No, we're not proposing any lighting whatsoever.
Okay.
Which means your only visitations will be during the day.
Correct.
And signage?
No signage being proposed.
Okay. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, 7.3.9 is safety and environmental standards. Emergency services, it says the applicant shall provide a copy of the project summary, electrical schematic, and site plan to the local emergency services entity.
Yes, so that will be provided by Dynamic to the fire department, police department, and for their files.
Okay, great. Unauthorized access, I think that's covered by the fence, preventing unauthorized access. Land clearing, soil erosion, and habitat impacts we talked about. Wildlife corridors we talked about. Natural buffer for large solar projects, that's the 50-foot setback that we've been talking about. And then there's the abandonment or decommissioning section, which
Correct.
is 7.3.11.
Correct.
And I saw in the application there was a detailed plan for that.
Correct.
Did
Okay.
anybody have
Good to me.
questions
Did
about
you have any
that?
questions about it?
No.
Okay, and then 7.4.0 is the solar energy facility permit requirements. So they need a special permit from us and a building permit from the licensed building inspector. And the setback waiver, which we've been talking
We're
about.
working on that now, right?
Right, so it just says that we may reduce the minimum setback distance as appropriate based on site-specific conditions or others.
We good? We getting to the
Yeah,
end?
I think that's pretty much,
Good.
I think, this is, I've never done one of these before, so,
That's good information.
yeah, I
Okay.
think we're good.
So let's take a look now at 12.79, our standard
Whoa,
special.
whoa, 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 can I just ask, just for the board to clarify? And I'm sure that these are trustworthy applicants, but you're taking their word that they're going to do certain things with no proof that they're going to do them in terms of reporting the utilities, the public safety. So I just want to make you aware that you're taking their word for them. So if there is,
You talking about the EMS?
I'm talking about a couple
Piece.
of items that you just went through and they said, yeah, we'll take care of it. It's good to go. So I'm just.
We're not drafting a decision yet,
I
right?
didn't hear
We're
any of
just
that.
going
Okay,
through
all right,
the
I just
report.
wanna-
Yeah, isolate to
I
me
just
which
want
one-
you to-
Which one we were taking their word for?
You taking their word for.
I mean, I want to know.
Okay, so, because you just sort of said, yep, that's good. So I just want to make
That
sure
was the
that
decommissioning one that was in the report? where they
there's
discussed
a
it?
notification to the utility company that they've been notified. There was something about notification to the emergency services, proof of liability insurance. I mean, I'm just pointing out that you're saying this is okay, but we have no proof of these
Of
correspondence.
contact to EMS, that's the
I'm
only
just,
one.
so either think about it in terms of conditions, or, I don't want it to come back to the board that you verbally said A-okay, and that something doesn't come through, and that you're held responsible for something that's put in the zoning, but you're not ensuring that it's actually happening. That's all. I'm just making you aware. You can continue on. I just want to make you aware
And
of
I'm
that.
glad that you did, thank you.
Okay.
When we get to drafting, at
Okay.
any point, can you help us figure out which pieces were not in the actual application so that we can be sure that they're addressed?
That's the 2
And we
points
have
that
no
she
issue
mentioned.
with making a condition part of the approval, conditions for that. Some of that is, as far as notification to the fire department and police department, is, pending approval of the project. I know that we can provide documentation that they've been working with Eversource, or Dynamic can, and of course the insurance certificates and so forth, which would come after the approval from the city.
Okay, thank you.
Jessica, can you clarify a question for me about the zoning ordinance?
Sure.
So the purpose of the solar energy facilities section, 7.1.0, says, the last sentence, the provisions set forth in this section shall take precedence over all other sections when considering applications related to the construction, operation, and/or repair of solar energy facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that the normal section 12.3 does not apply here, and we're only?
It means that it's an additional layer of review in addition to 12.7, so
And
that's,
that's on top of
and that, yeah, so it's like and this is similar with other sections that may require a special permit. We have the sort of standard special permit criteria for approval, and then depending on what the use is, if there's additional potential for nuisance or safety issues, and those are kind of layered as another part of the review process. So there's almost like 2 points to it.
Was the fire department notified as part of the normal reaching out to boards?
Yes, they were notified.
Okay. So I mean, that kind of covers our EMS notification, right?
You'll need to determine that as a board.
I'm looking at the board
Okay.
now. I mean, the fire department was notified. There were no comments received.
Just sorry, a couple more things in this section that I think we should discuss.
Go ahead.
So there's a, let's see. So in the abandonment and decommissioning in the permit requirements section 7.4.6, there's a financial surety option. So we may require a form of surety either through escrow, bond, or otherwise to cover cost of removal. So there's that. Do folks have any thoughts about?
Well, I think because it's coming up again, we better go in a little bit more detail so that everyone knows, and it's on film, which we're being recorded now, about your decommissioning. Can you go into some detail about that?
Sure, maybe John, you want to talk about your decommissioning? Part of the application talks about the decommissioning component of it, and
So that is typically the process. If you require some type of surety or bond or whatever, we build that into the project, the decommissioning and removal of the equipment after a period of, say, for instance, 30 years.
And what have you stated in here in your proposal? We have a section, you've got a decommissioning plan overview, where you're saying that expected to start upon receipt of approval, it's considered extremely unlikely, and it'll be restored in accordance with the equipment dismantling and removal and site restoration procedure in this document, which then goes on to talk about the decommissioning of your inverters and above ground structure and below ground. And what you're saying in here is that you will handle all decommissioning. Is that in essence what we're reading in this document? And do you all see that as well?
Right, but it doesn't suggest requiring. There's no
Surety
surety
that they will
written
then
in
do
here.
what they've said
Yes.
that they're going to do. Well,
It seems like a best practice to me.
yeah, but how do you determine an amount? And is that even appropriate?
It says in the last sentence that the applicant shall submit a fully inclusive estimate of the costs associated with removal, prepared by a qualified engineer. So if you want to, if that answers the question on how the number is come up with, is the applicant provides the number.
The number, right, which would delay our process. We'd require, in order to move forward, we'd require that information.
If you feel like they need to have a financial surety, you need to make that determination of, it doesn't say they have to have one, it says that you may request one. So you need to determine whether you feel like
how does the board feel? Let's start with
Need to request
Harry.
one.
Is this the electrical company we're talking about, or the Williston School?
No, this is Dynamic Energy is the, owns all the equipment, panels, everything, and they just, the power from this 650 kilowatt.
Well, the
power.
question I have is if something went wrong and they wanted to bail out of this whole thing,
Yeah,
would the school back them up and help with the financial resource or whatever if they're taking out all that stuff out of there?
I guess,
I want to understand your question a little better. If something happened during construction?
No, if it's, say, 5 years or 6 years down the road, you wanted to just pull out of there for some reason. And you decided, you just picked up and took off with the school back you people up.
Williston. Would
Would
Williston?
Williston back you people up? and
Essentially, it's
pay
a
for
question,
that?
who's footing the bill for decommission?
If they want to walk out after 5 or 6 years, I think we'd be pretty happy.
Well,
Because it's on our property,
so-
we would end up.
Right, they
owning-
would own it.
We
Have
would
it.
end up
It
owning
would
the system.
be,
They would benefit from it.
Ever happened?
why?
well, the other thing.
Have you ever walked out on a property before?
No. Are you
And,
addressing-
yeah, and how long has your company been in business?
12 years.
What is the-
I'll have to clarify that for you because I've only been with me a short time.
These solar facilities do have a lifespan though, correct? They don't last forever. So eventually it will be decommissioned.
Eventually, anything gets decommissioned, yes, so the
What's-
typical target is approximately 30 years, but there are projects in Massachusetts, some of the oldest projects that are still going strong. So the efficiency can go down a little bit every year, but equipment has only improved, so the panels are only better than they were 30 years ago. But yes, that would be a typical expectation. I think many projects that have been installed won't be decommissioned in 30 years.
I think your point is very good, Harry, that, we have to think of this where it's not just this one company coming in behind them. What's behind them is Williston.
Right.
And so it's not likely that, that Williston's gonna allow such a thing to sit.
Right, I mean, Wilson's a well-established
Yeah.
situation, so I don't think we're,
Well,
I don't got anything to worry about.
And as he said, there's financial incentive, so they're getting the credits as the facility is being used, and those credits are going to Dynamic. I don't know what the agreement is between Williston and Dynamic, but Dynamic is getting something out of this by being the host basically for this. If Dynamic walks away, then Williston gets those credits on their energy bill. So it seems like, from what I've heard, that Williston would like to have those credits
It's
if
a win-win
possible,
situation.
right?
right.
Okay.
I want to give Chet a chance to weigh in on this.
No, I just,
Surety or no surety?
well, they're gonna have something on that. So, might as well have a surety if you might as well pile it on if you're going to.
Okay, so yes, surety?
Sure.
And you?
Yes, surety.
Surety? Do you want to go yay or nay?
I don't think we need one.
I agree with you. I don't think we need one either. I think we're well backed up. So we have a split on the board in decision with that, which we'll need to weigh in our final vote.
Yeah.
Do you have any other issues there?
So
Have a controversy.
just make sure that we have the technical documentation that's required. I think we do. The solar energy facility technical specifications, we have the tower foundation blueprints or drawings. We have
Yes,
those.
that's part of
And
the original
electrical
application.
And the electrical schematic we have.
That was that fourth page in.
Okay. And we've talked about all of these, the operation and maintenance, the landscape plan. We are authorized to hire outside consultants if we choose, but we do not have to as the planning board. And the last section pertains to building integrated solar energy facilities, so that's not relevant.
Okay, let's whoop through these. 12.79. That it conforms with the provisions of the ordinances of the City of East Hampton, the general laws of Massachusetts, and all applicable rules and regulations of state and federal agencies. Anyone see any conflicts there? No? That it has protection of city amenities and abutting properties through the minimizing of any detrimental or offensive uses or destruction of unique or important natural, scenic, or historic features on the site. There's one elm tree, but other than that. Minimization of traffic and safety impacts of the proposed development on adjacent highways, roads, and maximizes the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site. We're looking at very little movement here overall.
There's no problem there.
Adequacy of the methods of disposal of sewage and refuse. There is no sewage and refuse. That's not relevant. Adequate means of protecting wetlands, watersheds, aquifers, and well areas. And you have conservation work that you're doing with them, so that...
We have approval, which is part of the application, so they have approved the project as you see it tonight.
Okay. Mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, including the effect on the city's water supply. You're not using any water here?
No, we're not.
Provisions for the off-street loading and unloading of vehicles. You're not doing any of that. Parking, lighting, thermal, there's none of that involved.
There is the loading and unloading of vehicles in terms of the children coming off the bus.
It says off-street.
Okay, well, that's on-street. So you may want to think about that in terms of the pedestrian movement and vehicular movement.
Talking about the side of the road there.
I'm going back to C.
Okay.
I'm going back a bunch. You kind of sort of skipped over it.
Minimization of traffic and safety impacts. Well, so you're talking about that, you're saying, no, Jim, it isn't that there's very little movement. There's a bus that's coming
I
here.
just want to alert you that there's going
Yeah.
to be a bus with children parked on Park Street and loading, unloading. Not off-street, but on the street. So again, just think about that.
Now, if I remember what you said, and I'd like you to clarify, is you said that it'll pull into that little driveway before the gate, so it's not actually on Parks, or it'll be on the entrance to Whitebrook on the side of the road.
Correct.
It doesn't actually park on Park Street. Am I wrong about that?
I heard differently.
No, I didn't say that the bus would pull into the site. I said that the bus would either park on Park Street, which
Okay,
there's a sidewalk that runs along the entire frontage of the property, and/or park on the access road of Whitebrook to let the children out and students out to go into the site.
Mark, could I just clarify that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would really be a matter for us to talk about the school department and make sure that, however, if they were to use this site for educational purposes, we want to make sure that they're at, if they have to bring kids to this site by vehicle, we want to have them disembark from the vehicle in the safest place possible. My expectation would be you probably want to do it for the East Hampton Public School students, probably right on the Whitebrook, that roadway that goes in and out of Whitebrook and not on Park Street. That's what I would recommend for our students, because we're going to be coming in, it's going to be smaller classes. We're probably going to be able to just use our own vehicles and go right on the site and disembark within the site. That'd be my intention and plan.
I think that's worthy of a stipulation that buses don't park on Park
Yeah,
Street.
condition.
I think that's a really good and important piece. Anyone else feel that's
No.
appropriate or inappropriate? Good?
No, that's good.
Would you like to see that as a provision as well? Yes.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so I think that's a stipulation we'll be looking to put in. All right. Anything else you saw there, Jessica, that stood out that you want to alert me to? Okay.
I'll let you know.
Thanks. Applicants' efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape through design features such as vegetative buffers and retention of open space or agricultural land. You're not really developing much here. You are doing some clearing, which I think is going to be of a benefit for the traffic coming out there. Any issues there? Okay. Minimization of area over which existing vegetation is to be removed, or tree removal is required. Special attention is to be given to the planting of replacement trees. That's an interesting concept. You are pulling some trees out. One in
Yes.
which I feel some remorse from the board here. So are you putting any new trees out?
No, we're not. The solar array don't like trees. So that the trees we're maintaining are along the Park Street side of the property. If we were to plant any trees, would affect the capacity or the output of the panels, unless they were planted within the buffer zone.
But the intention there is to leave it in its natural state.
Correct, and the Conservation Commission wants it to be left as a meadow, which it is today.
Okay. Question?
I wonder about just, like, there's a couple of dead ash trees that are gonna be removed. Maybe a couple of trees could be replaced there to,
That's in the front where you're
In the
putting
buffer zone?
the four poles in? Is that where the dead ash trees are?
Yeah, there's 2 dead ash trees at the corner,
oh, they're in the corner
Yeah, they're
spot
right
where
over
the
here,
poles
where
need to
the
go.
four
so that's for the poles.
Got it.
If you look at that rendering, you'll see how they, in order to put the poles up, those, that wooded corner is gonna be cut. And there's 2 dead ash trees in the corner. Actually, that last Friday's storm, a large branch fell off of one of them and onto the school's property, which the city cleaned up. Out
Okay,
here,
so that's not an option. Okay,
Right.
just a thought.
Yeah, it was a good thought. Any other ideas there? Okay. The consistency of the development with respect to setback, area, placement of parking, architectural style, and landscaping of the surrounding buildings and development. You have approval for the 2 abutters and the 3rd abutter, which is the school.
Correct. For the waiver request. The only structure is the shed, which we have a typical section of a shed within the application.
I saw the picture of that. It looks different. Any questions with that? All right. Adequacy of the measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater, to minimize erosion and the sedimentation, and to minimize changes in groundwater levels, increased runoff, and potential for flooding. You're not really changing any of that. It's
No,
just
we're
gonna be
not.
the same
And
as it is.
that's one of the reasons that the underlying vegetation is gonna remain, and the topography is not gonna change to allow the stormwater that falls on the panels to infiltrate into the ground as it does today.
And finally, adequacy of the methods to ensure that the use will not constitute a nuisance by reason of unacceptable level of air or water pollution, excessive noise, or visually flagrant structures and accessories. I do have a question there. Albedo. How much do your panels generate? That's reflectiveness. Are they overly bright? Will it
They're
affect
not-
passersby driving?
Panels, by the nature of their
Sorry, this is a little loud. Can you speak?
Yes, so you're actually asking about how reflective they are. They're absorbent, so they're very flat, they don't reflect. The whole idea is for them to absorb as much light as possible. So you'll commonly, if you look into any airport you fly into, you can frequently see them on parking structures, etc. At Logan, Manchester, just for that reason that the reflection is very, very low. I can email you a study on it, it's pretty interesting. Because it's designed to absorb light.
Any other questions about nuisance? And that gets us through our criteria. So, looking at my notes,
Make sure you offer to the public the potential
Comments.
comment. Don't forget.
looking at my notes so far, I just want to state out here, we talked about contact to EMS, we talked about the fire department being notified, we talked about requirement for proof of insurance. What was the one we just added, which I didn't write down, that we want to put in here? Anyone recall? No, great.
Who's gonna pay for the thing if they decide to bail out?
Well, that's the surety, and that one we disagreed with. There was one other that we just agreed we wanted. No parking, that's what it was, no parking for the bus. Okay, so at this point, does the public have any commentary that they'd like to? Hi. I'm gonna let them come on up here, state your name and where you're from, please.
Good evening. My name's Deborah Nuttleman. I live at 6 Button Road. My property doesn't abut the property that the solar panels are going to be on. I'm within the 300 abutter range, and my deck faces White Brook Road, so the panels are going to be facing the back of my property. I would like to see a larger setback than the 5 foot to the fence, and I'd like to see more vegetation. And I would really encourage the board to get documentation in writing, not verbally, for these exception rules, whether the bond for dismantlation, the insurance, everything. things get dropped on the wayside 5, 10 years from now, when you go back in your records, it'd be better to have it written down.
And I just want to be clear in understanding, you're on, in his map here, you're to the south of the property.
Yes, yes.
And your goal is to have vegetation planted
I
where
think
you
so,
can't
yeah,
see,
yeah.
where you can't see you don't want to see the panels.
Right, yeah. And
Thank
just, it's a residential area. The setback should be a lot larger than what the application is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up. Name and location.
My name is John Kavanaugh. I live on Park Street. I appreciate the very thorough presentation. I guess I have 3 comments. Clarification on the inverter east of the Park Street. How far down is that? The inverter transformer, roughly how many feet?
If you want to come up and answer that, I'm certainly not going to be able to.
Roughly.
Off of
Park Street to the east?
to the east.
Yeah, roughly. I guess the pole
Yeah.
is, the first pole is how many feet to the?
So coming off of, so there's 3 poles being
Yeah.
proposed that.
So how far is the-
And it's probably about 10 to 15 feet between the poles coming from the existing pole.
These poles, are these the poles you're referring to at the very
Right.
corner?
Okay, so I hadn't seen it. I'm sorry, I
Okay.
couldn't see it. So there's 3 poles there. Is there existing poles there now?
Yeah, one of them is the existing pole.
Okay.
That's the-
Because
that's-
in
this
terms
is the
of
existing pole.
scenic impact and, visibility going down that street, from White Brook down, there is no poles. So I don't know why we wouldn't be going underground as a concept to maintain the significant impact of the whole area there. So that's one comment. The other thing was, there's a catch basin at the top of the driveway?
Mhm.
Okay, and there's a culvert that runs due east?
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of all the pile driving or things that you're putting in there, the minor excavation, my vested interest in who's going to maintain that culvert during the,
So what Mr. Kavanaugh is talking about is that there's a catch basin within Park Street located right here. The city has an easement going down into the property itself. We're going to work with DPW to make sure that that stays intact and that if any repairs are needed or changes to that, it would still function because it takes stormwater from the roadway and discharges it towards the rear of the property, and we're going to maintain that.
good, that's my vested interest in making sure it's still
Yes.
functional, okay. And the last thing is, I know there's a few numbers. The height of the fence, the chain link fence is proposed to be a height?
6 feet.
Okay, and the height of the panels is approximately
8
at the
feet.
most northwestern, I think I got that right, the most northwestern point is approximately?
So it's 6.5 off the ground, it's about 6.5 feet because we're keeping the fence 6 inches off of the ground surface.
Okay, and the height of the panel is approximately at that
8
area?
feet.
Okay, so my vested interest also is similar, is I'd kind of like not to see the underside of the panels. So if that accommodation can be maintained, appreciate that.
The underside of the panels?
So I don't see the
Which
underside of the
side are you on?
panels.
The north or the south?
I'm on the,
You come
North.
around.
North.
He's on the north. That's why you
Yes.
say the underside, because they're tilted toward
Yes,
you now.
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Right.
so hopefully this fence is such that I wouldn't be seeing the underside of the panels. That's my vested interest in that location.
Yep.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure, 1 or 2 questions. Are you one of the 2 abutters?
Yes.
And you've given approval?
Yes.
Okay, but you're
I've
still
given
interested.
approval, having not seen any of this detail, this presentation. I appreciate the presentation, but I'm just saying, yeah, I'm in agreement with.
Well, I
the,
respect. I'm trying
yeah,
to make sure I
sure.
understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Anyone?
I just, for the record, I guess, the applicant in Williston are very cognizant of the location of Mr. Kavanaugh's house, and are going to work to make sure that his wishes are met
Okay.
relative to that.
Anyone else? Do you have a question?
I would just like, I'm not sure if this is the exact right moment to interject this, but I do wonder if a site visit might be useful, especially so that we can get a sense of where the abutters are and what the view looks like, because I don't get a clear sense of that from the materials provided, so I would like to propose a site visit.
Any thoughts? No? Go ahead.
Yeah, the lady that lives down there, because I can see this. Oh, I can't think of her name. This lady right here.
Deborah Nettleman? Is that who you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
From your house, how much of this whole thing can you see? The whole thing, or just small parts of it, or what?
My house, probably, I can see where that large pond is. I'm a little bit to the left of it. I can see directly out that way.
Should see most of it.
So would you see the whole thing?
I probably will see the whole thing, yeah.
Probably would, the way she's angled.
If the vegetation's cut down,
Hmm.
I can see at least the top of it.
Okay. We have two.
Oh, I'm just trying to figure out what we could possibly do to,
I mean, I have to raise the fence. It's really the only thing, and they have to be careful. They can't go too much because that's the side the sun's coming from.
Right.
And at some point, it blocks it, and there's limits to how
We also
high
have fence height limitations.
it can go.
Yeah, it
so
seems like,
Right. I'm just curious.
I don't know what. I mean, if anyone can think of a solution for that.
So do people have
It's the
thoughts
back
on
of the panels.
on doing a site visit?
Site visit.
It's the back of the panels she's seeing, right?
No, she's
Right.
seeing the front of the
Front.
panels.
You're
He's-
seeing all the
Yeah,
front?
he's seeing
The
the
base of them.
Yeah. What do you guys think about the site visit? Do you want to go see it? I'm good. I've seen it. I don't need
We've
it.
talked about the need to do site visits more regularly on the planning board, so I'm proposing that we do one.
Well, what would
This is
serve the
new
purpose?
construction.
What
It's
would
new
serve the purpose?
construction. I think it's a best practice to go out there and take a look in person because there's maybe things in the materials that, are easier to understand in person.
Like the existence of a culvert. I, however, know that area fairly well, so I'm comfortable. Are you comfortable?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with it, I've been there before.
All right. I think what'll need to happen is we'll have to vote.
Great.
I'll have that be part of the vote. And that's true of the surety as well, which I think is going to split us.
Sure, yeah.
Do we want to bring that up again for one last discussion? In order to do a surety, we'd need to then kick it back to them to present to us an accurate reporting, as Jessica described. It has a number involved in it as to how much a surety should be, which we don't currently have before we give approval. I don't know exactly how long something like that would take. Any ideas? Any thoughts? How long it would take to generate that?
Or could it be a condition of the approval before issuance of the building permit?
Typically, we could.
To do it beforehand without knowing the number of the surety, though, seems a little sketchy.
Typically,
Well,
the decisions often have a dollar amount in the decision. There have been some decisions in the past that just simply said they required a surety, but I'm thinking mostly with subdivision approvals, there's typically a number that's been associated with it.
Yeah.
The last surety we had for a non-subdivision project was East Hampton Savings Bank, and they had a performance bond for the stormwater systems. So, but I guess this is where I'm, in terms of the administration of it. Typically we release the surety after the project's constructed with a subdivision or any other development project. So what's just from an administrative standpoint, whatever surety maybe you do a letter of credit or something like that. That's something that the city's going to have to administer and keep track of over a 30-year period of time. So do you have information on typically how it works in terms of that surety? I mean, you're not going to want to carry a bond for 30 years. So I guess I'm looking for clarification on how it typically works for a project that you're holding the money for a decommission that may or may not ever happen. With a development project, we know that the stormwater systems are going to get built. We know that the roads are going to get built, so then we release it.
Right, so it would be a percentage of the project for X amount of years allocated to the decommissioning. It could be a bond, it could take a number of different forms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if that could be, as was already mentioned, and perhaps you can clarify this for me, if an acceptable surety, if the language could be a condition of the permit that an acceptable surety is presented, a condition of the permit.
To who? I mean, typically, who does the surety
So
go to?
how it would work is I wouldn't sign off on the building permit until something was presented.
Correct.
So the building permit would get held up until there's some documentation that something's in place.
Correct.
And acceptable to whom?
Well, that's what, I mean, the board is basically saying for whatever amount, you're not looking at what that amount is, so you don't necessarily know what, I mean, so.
Because it doesn't come back to us.
It wouldn't, it would be my call,
So it's you. It'd have to be acceptable to Justin.
I guess, to the planning department, or I'd probably throw in the city engineer as well, as
Yeah.
somebody who might have some,
I think if something like that were to occur, it would need language acceptable to,
so you could
City
say
engineer and
city officials or city departments or something like that. You don't have to be super specific, but, or unless you want to, it doesn't matter, but.
Or just the city.
I don't like, I'm
administrator.
not comfortable with me just being the one that says
Yeah,
this
no,
number,
I
this
wouldn't
number
wanna
is
be
okay.
either,
I'd
yeah.
like some check and balance with that,
I
so.
would just like to say, I understand that there's a need to deal with permit applications in an expedient manner. However, because this is new construction, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for a site visit and to make sure that we fully discuss the surety issue. And I'm feeling some hesitancy from the other board members about doing those two things. I don't know why. I'm wondering if it's because you want to be expedient.
I don't need a
But-
site visit.
No.
I know what I need to know.
I don't have any problem with the surety. I've had 5 kids that went to this school and went there, and I go by there almost every day, so I don't think that,
But-
for me to walk it with.
Do we need a quorum for a site visit?
You don't, and I mean, well, here's the
I'm
thing,
not-
I mean, I think that the board needs to understand that there's one board member who's not comfortable.
Right.
And that you're forcing a decision
Well,
on somebody
and the
who might not be
difficult thing is
comfortable.
this is a special permit and it requires a 4 out of 5, right?
You need to have at least 4, all 4 of you need to vote in favor in order to
Which is
move
why I
forward.
say we'll take a vote on that.
No, I'm talking about the decision in
permit.
general.
In
If-
We all must
general.
vote in favor.
You know, if there's one member who's not comfortable with the language of the decision and the conditions and could vote against it, then the permit is sunk.
Right.
And then it's not approved because it's a 3-1 vote.
Right.
You have to have a 4-0 vote on this permit in order
About
for it
being
to
held
pass.
hostage, that's BS.
You're not being held hostage.
I
That's
see
just-
it. I see
I'm
this way.
sorry, excuse me.
Whoa.
Tell me,
Okay,
to
I'm
say
sorry,
that
I
you
can
are,
see
that
you're
I am
taking it
holding
very
the
seriously.
board hostage and to say that it's BS when I'm just asking for very simple best practices. And every time I try to go through the criteria to make sure that we are doing due diligence to the city that we represent here, you rush me through and say, are you done yet? Are you done yet? I'm sorry. We have a job to do here. And I really don't appreciate being spoken to like that.
I would not be able to walk that with the leg that I have, because I have no leg, so I wouldn't be able to do that.
But you're not
But
required.
if
you're
I
not
was
required
able
go.
to, I would be more than happy to walk it, and I'll try to walk it if you want me to.
I would like to go see the site. I don't think it's required that everyone attend the site visit, but I'm not familiar with that part of town. I've never seen this site before. I don't feel comfortable voting for something that I haven't seen and haven't had an opportunity to walk through
I
with
agree
the
with you.
people. And
I
I don't think
agree
it would
with
be
you.
responsible.
Right, so my initial concept on that was that one piece we bring to a vote. We talk about and discuss. Okay?
About
Are you-
what, the site visit?
Yes, do we go on a site visit?
You don't have, I don't think
It's
you're.
just my procedure.
I understand that this is your procedures, but you don't need to take I mean, here, let me put it to you this way. You all have the right to do the most due diligence that you need to do in order to feel comfortable in voting and setting conditions.
I'll go with it.
If you need, if the board needs more time, whether it's collecting documentation for things that are required in the zoning for them to produce that they have not produced or shown evidence of, whether it's to allow a site member to have the opportunity to go visit a site because they need more information, I think the board can take another meeting to get that information.
I don't disagree.
Okay.
But that isn't my decision to make. It's the board's decision.
Okay, fine.
That's where the
Go ahead.
it's democracy. Okay. Are you willing to go do a site visit?
Yeah.
Are you willing to go?
Yes.
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 Great. We're gonna do a site visit.
Great.
Okay.
So when is it scheduled for?
Well,
Is the applicant, do you want to do it on a weekend or do you want to do it after work night kind of thing?
Weekend works for me. Saturday.
Do like a Saturday.
Saturday would do.
Does it work for you?
I can't do this Saturday or the following Saturday, but other than that, sure.
Let's pick another day
Okay,
then.
so
A
it would be
weeknight,
nice to be
perhaps?
able to not put this off a month. So let's find a happy medium. If we can, is there like a Friday? Can we do a Friday? Are you available on a Friday? I just don't, I think that you absolutely have the right to get more information, but I think that we also need to not make the applicant wait another month. So if we can find something between now and the next meeting date, that would be ideal, within the next 2 weeks.
So Friday night?
That's fine with me.
And that would be this Friday coming?
19th, is the applicant available to meet
I'm sorry,
on the
no,
19th?
I have a wedding on
I
this
can't.
Friday night.
Okay, how
We're going out
about
for dinner.
the following Friday, the 26th,
following.
or any night during the middle, during the
I
week?
can do, you know, earlier in the day on Friday also. But
I work, but I don't need to go, so it can be you. Pretty much you need to decide when you can make it, unless you guys are planning on going as well.
Just let me know what time, that's all.
Yep.
26th, does that work?
yeah.
Okay. Can the applicant be available on the 26th
Next Friday.
for a site
Yeah,
visit?
that's
It would be you, Mark? I don't know if,
And Jeff or?
and Jeff,
Yes.
and Chuck? Okay.
Yeah.
Morning or afternoon?
Afternoon, whichever is, anytime
Morning,
is okay with us.
afternoon?
Doesn't matter to me.
Do you want to just say 9 a.m. and get it over with?
Sure.
Is that all right? Does that work for you, Jeff? Libby, does that work for you?
It's great.
Harry?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And that leaves the surety issue. And we were talking about the possibility of coming up with language that said that we would require a surety as a stipulation that was acceptable to the planning department and the city engineer, or not doing a surety. My take on it, and I still feel the same as I did before, is that I don't believe it's necessary in this case, because I believe with Williston behind them, I think that we're in good stead.
I totally agree. That the school's been around forever. It's been part of the city for the last, 75 years? 100, how long's it been?
175.
75 years they've been in the city. They're not going anywhere.
170.
They got a great reputation. Everything they do is fine. I mean, they're a real standard in the city. So I mean,
Because we won't be making a decision tonight because we're doing the site visit, what I'd like to propose is that we continue that piece of the hearing till next time so that we can, you know, have some more time to think about it, since we have a split decision right now.
That's amenable to me. Just out of curiosity, how long would it take, do you think, for you to put together a number for a surety, if you were requested to do so?
We can do that very quickly. You know, there's obviously an interest on our part of doing this very quickly, and that is it's more explanatory because of the way the SRECs work in the state for allocations to projects built this year. So we're more than happy to work with you and answer your questions very, very quickly.
Is it something you might be able to have by the next meeting?
And when would be your next?
So September 6th is the next meeting.
Yes, it is.
That would help us, I think, when we come back to that meeting.
Great.
Okay?
You're saying the next meeting is September 6th?
September 6th. So before the board continues the public hearing to that date, is there any other information besides the surety that you want from them? So that, is there any clarifications you need on the plan? Is there anything else that you want to request so that the applicant is clear and knows what they need to do?
We'll be looking for a proof of insurance. That was an item that came up in the in our discussions. We'll also want the stipulation about no parking on Park Street for the bus.
But there's nothing to provide for them, that's
No,
just
I'm
something
just
you would,
noting
that
what
would be a
we've got.
condition of
Be
the.
part of it.
And
So
probably
in-
stipulation
in terms
about
of
that.
information, so you need surety and you need proof of you're looking for proof of insurance.
I think we technically need proof that they talked to Eversource.
I think an email
if you
correspondence or
have anything
I
from
think
them.
something very,
I'm sure we could use.
I'm sure. So just something
Careful what you ask for.
that just provides evidence that they're in the loop.
There's unlimited amount of information we can give.
I'm sure, something brief, nothing, we don't need the whole packet.
Okay.
Just something to keep in the file would be helpful.
Okay. Is there anything anyone wants to discuss about this now before we vote to postpone?
No.
All right.
It's not postpone, it's continue.
Continue. Forgive my language. All right, so we're going to continue this then until our next meeting.
Need to take a
And
vote.
we're going to look for a motion for that.
I move to continue the special permit decision on the large solar energy facility on Park Street until the September 6th, 2016
At
meeting
6 p.m.
at 6 p.m.
I'll second that.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against or abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And she'll set a site visit with you, or has done so.
Where would you like to meet for the site visit? Should we meet at the driveway access point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Everybody clear? Driveway access point?
Okay.
Do we have a golf cart for Chet?
Chet?
No, I'm absolutely serious. Does
No.
Williston have a golf cart or something to help Chet navigate the site or some?
You have your.
Yeah, we could,
show up.
Okay, all right. That would be appreciated. That would be huge. Okay, thank you. Okay,
And somewhere,
we have to get Jesse.
is
for-
hiding.
Right now.
I think this was your copy that I took.
Oh, thank you.
I need my fuel, so
Hey, maybe we can all learn something. Who knows?
I mean, you know, I don't know. It's like it's a different lens to look at it from,
I've been
right?
going down it since I was like 12 years old. That's a long time.
But did you ever go down there thinking about
Go hunt
solar
him.
panels?
Not a
Jeff-
solar
I just went after him.
No.
Where is he? Hey, Jesse.
I have no idea where he went.
I think it used to be like a tree farm or something.
He was hiding. He's probably sleeping.
Jessica,
Yes.
was there a check for the legal ad? Oh, okay.
I should have,
Yeah, so
yeah.
you just want people
Here we
legal
go
to
without
do
this.
Admin at my office sent it to me, there's an odd one.
Yeah, that's the legal.
That's the legal ad. Oh, okay.
It
says-
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Enter that into the, okay.
yeah, thank you so much.
All right,
No.
moving right along.
Move right along.
Sign ordinance time?
Sign ordinance. All right, hold on.
Sure.
You gotta make it worth your wait.
Sure.
Okay.
Woke me up to this.
Okay, so. Sorry. For some reason I thought I had more copies, but I don't. I'm sorry. Can we share?
I have a second copy too.
I'm gonna have to kiss and make up. Sorry.
I'm not wounded.
You have one?
I have a second.
You guys, I
one.
sent
that
them
okay
to you in the
with you?
mail, right?
Okay.
I sent it to you in the mail? Okay.
I got another one here.
Oh, you have an extra?
Sign ordinance. Again. Cut it on.
Okay, so, where we're at. So, there's basically just a couple of sections that, that I worked on, which may end up having a lot of discussion on. So we'll try to make this, efficient. So we'll skip the definitions section for now. The first section that has substantial additional language is under the exempt signs section. So these are signs that would not count towards the total amount of signage allowed and should be exempt from the regulations. And we need to sort of have a discussion on each one of these points. So the first one, I believe, is language that already exists in our current ordinance, I believe. So signs including movable signs erected and maintained by the city of East Hampton. Actually, no, I changed this, so this is my own stuff. Other municipal corporation in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the federal government on any land, building, or structure in use by such government entity, including signs erected by such governmental entity at any location required for public or environmental health, safety, or notification purposes. So say we have a tornado that happens and we have to get up signage for evacuations or anything that's being put up by the city of East Hampton or any other governmental agency is exempt.
Does that include like cultural chaos sign or movies by the park?
That's a good question, but right now, under the current ordinance, there's a specific provision for Parks and Rec because there was
Right.
an oversight during the initial drafting, and I think this new language would cover it. Again, because we can't talk about the content of the language, we can only talk about the sign itself, so we can't say special event sign. We can't like specifically refer, which is what that language under Parks and Rec exemption is right now.
I mean, I guess if we're comfortable allowing the town or any department in the town and putting up whatever signs they want on town property, then we don't have to get into the content. But I don't know if that's something we want to do.
Right, and so the other thought is, they wouldn't have to abide by the sign ordinance, so all the dimensional standards and all that stuff isn't necessarily applicable either the way that's currently drafted, and I'm not sure if that's exactly the right way to go either.
Right.
But it's providing an exemption to governmental agencies on some level. So that's, I guess, a question to think about I think we should just go through these and then maybe come back and have a discussion. Signs which meet the Department of Transportation standards and which contain no commercial message of any sort. Basically, I wanted to say traffic control signs without saying traffic control signs. So stop signs, one-way signs, yield signs, no parking signs, that sort of thing. But they have to meet the Department of Transportation standards. And they have a very specific uniform standard book on those signs and the sizes and the typology and stuff. So
That's the State Department of Transportation.
right.
Yeah.
Do them at a right Massachusetts Department.
Maybe,
Mad that.
might as well.
Any sign within a building except for the regulated window signs. So we've talked about this before, that there's sort of this kind of, if you can see it from the outside, within that sort of, I think we have a 1 foot distance right now. 1 foot of the glass surface, but we can't be regulating any signage that's the interior of a building. It's out of jurisdiction. I don't know how to write this without it referring to content, but basically your address sign, the number of your house, that sort of thing. And so,
And that's exempted, I think, in the Reed case. I think they talk about the directional street signs and street house
identification.
numbers.
Because it's a public safety issue.
Right, the house number, but like it sort of gets fishy, right? What if your restaurant is called 22 Main or something like that, right? Like you can
Right.
Work around
But
it.
I think that's just sort of the nature of creating a bylaw.
Right.
But I think those are both specifically exempted, so I think we might even be able to be more explicit about the Department of Transportation signs.
Okay.
I'll go back and look at that case and see, but I think I don't remember how they refer to them, but I think they refer to stop signs,
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
That
That's what I was
doesn't
trying to
count.
get at without saying
Right.
stop signs. Works of art that do not include a commercial message. So I think, and I just put it in because we have so much public art in this community, and it's a huge part of how we're perceived, and it's just a huge part of who we are, I believe. That as long as it's not advertising a specific business, that it's okay. So
Did you find other places that have done this? Because it does seem...
I pulled it out of something else. I can't remember which of my
Yeah.
several examples that I have, but it was in there.
It's like an interesting spectrum, right? Like at some point, you're just painting the side of your business, right? Like you could paint it any colors you want, and then you're painting
Well, and I think, I
like
don't know
that
if
Pine Street mural on the side of...
so I made a comment here. So there's the off the map mural that has their name and telephone number as part of their mural. So this is where I think this gets a little gray, and maybe it's not even worth putting in there. But, we do have a quote-unquote work of art that's a private mural put on by a business on that building, and essentially, in a way, it is a sign. It's advertising what they do. It has their name and it has a telephone number. So
And that sounds like content to me too.
the works of art.
Well, the exclusion of commercial messaging, and that in itself is content.
Yeah,
I don't think we can do it, right?
It's, well, and I mean, even the work of art becomes a
Yeah.
First Amendment
judgment call,
thing.
right? I mean, so it's things that are exempt, but
But And I guess also, like, there's no actual definition of sign, like, general sign.
We'll get there. I
In
haven't
here,
got it in
but
there.
I
yet.
That
wonder
might
if
be
you
the
could-
way around it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
write the definition of sign so
Although,
that
how are
works
you
of
gonna-
art are,
Again, how are you gonna define it without the contents?
yeah.
Sure.
Because a mural is not, you could say it's not a sign. Like, it's just not a sign.
But
But
how would you
there's-
say that with
Right,
a
I
definition
don't
that
know.
doesn't? Right, that's the thing,
Right.
right? But and then, I mean, there's other ones.
You could
The
say
ghost-
a mural
The
is
ghost
not
murals
a
that
sign.
you see in communities, I call them the ghost murals of,
Right.
that was their sign, and they
Right.
would paint their
Right.
name of their company, and they're not in existence anymore. They might have been there 70 years ago, but you can still sort of see
Yeah,
the
you can
ghost of
sort of
that.
see it.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, it's tricky.
you know, that's, again, it's tricky. So,
Well, and even some of the murals we haven't. I mean, like defining what like a commercial message is, even if it's not having a business name. I mean, I think that bike path mural has Williston on it, right? Like things like that that are more sort of town based. But like if you were to do a mural like that and wanted to put Big E's and I mean
Right.
like that mural one is interesting. I don't know.
so we can just sort of hold it for now.
Yeah.
Okay. I just saw it, and I thought, given that we're a community that has a lot of art,
Yep.
it just seemed like an
Yeah,
interesting
but a
thing.
lot of murals without addressing the business would be just considered works of art.
But how would you define that?
The
That's-
giant East Hampton side on the side of Whiskers.
Well,
Right,
that's
'cause
like
it's
that.
got-
Would
it's a
that be
word.
a work of art?
It says East Hampton. So we're not advertising anything but ourselves.
Hopefully that's
So
allowable, I mean.
that would be in violation then.
Maybe.
Push it
Yeah,
off.
well, that's what I mean. It's gonna be, a lot of gray area is gonna happen on this.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, it is a fun one. So we'll just hold it for now.
Yeah, we definitely.
We
wanna
can
think
take it
that
out.
through.
We don't have to keep it in there, but
No, I mean we should definitely figure out how we're gonna keep things like that permissible.
a sign associated with an agricultural use as referred to in section 3 of Mass General Law, chapter 40A. That's the exemption for agricultural uses in the zoning. And then we have the right to regulate, reasonably regulate, quotes. So the maximum display area of such sign shall be 10 square feet. Again, throwing just a number out there, don't know if that's the right number.
What's the statute say about agricultural signs? They're like entitled to them by right?
Well, agricultural uses are exempt from zoning if they produce a certain profit and they're over 5 acres.
Oh, and so we're extrapolating that would also apply to their signage?
It could potentially.
Jeez.
Yeah. I just read that section of the law, like last
The
week.
exemption.
Yeah,
So all you need is 5 acres.
All you need is 5 acres.
but it's like 5 acres
And an
or 2
agricultural
acres
use.
with a certain gross
Right,
profit.
you have to have-
or
it's-
blah, blah,
it's-
blah.
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
complicated.
It's,
sure
you
you're
have to,
gonna
it's
have
gotta
to.
be
Yeah.
you gotta be able to be, not necessarily making a living, but making some
It's a
You have to
profit,
open,
make,
you have
selling
to
your
open
own,
your books.
selling your own profits, and there's even
Right.
Well,
There's a
your own
financial
profits versus
component.
somebody
Yeah.
else's product you're selling them. So say I'm,
Right.
So what would happen if a farmer has a stand on front of his house, but his actual farming property is
well, as
way
long as
down
he's
in the
selling his
meadows
own
somewhere?
products, I think it's okay. I think where it can get complicated is, say I'm an apple farmer and I'm buying blueberry pies from my neighbor down the street and selling them at my farm stand. And if the blueberry pies start moving and making more money than, say, my apples, then I may have
More blueberry
it may
pies.
be it may be an issue. Then you're
That goes right back to
So the question
brewery.
here is really, what is reasonable
back to the brewery.
regulation?
Yeah,
it is reasonable
For a
regulation.
sign for something that could be something like, pick your own apples this way, or
Right,
or
and
something.
that's an off-directional sign, and that's a whole other ball of wax.
Right.
This is for signage on somebody's property. This isn't even
Okay,
talking
so-
about having off-premise signage that's directing somebody to your property. And we're gonna have to have a big discussion about off-premise signs.
Right.
Okay, so in this hypothetical, then the pick your own apple sign, but
Property.
like down the hill from whatever, it's on the property.
It's on their property.
Yeah, so,
That would be like that beef sign coming down West Street, but you can go up Oliver Street and go up to the beef and get your beef. And he's got signs, well, handwritten signs in the roadways.
Right.
I don't
So
feel
that
like we
won't
need
be
to be
allowed.
super restrictive of agricultural signs, so I would just, I would advocate for a number that's like big enough that it's not gonna affect, be
Yeah.
hard for people to work around.
12 or 10 square feet.
10 square feet's like a
Something like
5 foot by
that.
2 foot sign.
Well, I'm also wondering if we need to be thinking about the number of signs, right? I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of them are multiple sign locations, I don't know.
So we'll make a note to,
I mean, I think these are exactly the kind of
yeah.
things that we need public input on to see what people care about, because this is just.
Because
I
you will
think we
get
should
most.
accept the fact that the public is not gonna comment on this until it's before city council.
Right.
Probably, right.
So you're suggesting that maybe in
So-
addition to 10 square feet, we say no more than like 3 or 5 of, and whatever that arbitrary number we put in, the public later, when it comes to city council, will clear it up, so don't worry too much about it.
I mean, the other thing is what we could do from
No, I
a
don't know
process
that.
standpoint is we just make note of these, and then once we get through everything, we invite the ordinance subcommittee to meet
Right.
directly and get their input
Right.
directly, and go over everything in one meeting that there may be questions or we want their input on. Because they do continue to have this on their own agenda.
Yep.
So, that might be a way to just hold, like, we want to keep this, but we don't know exactly what to do regarding multiple signage. I can just
Right.
make a note in the comment section.
Yeah, let's just make a note. 'cause I
Okay.
don't-
Yeah.
How many?
I wonder, like 10 square feet could be too small, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah, so it's just
It
a
could be too
question.
small. I'll make a
It would be
note.
good to ask, like Park Hill Orchard, for example, what they think.
That's a good idea.
Okay, prohibited signs. So, no animated or flashing signs, signs containing movable parts, signs containing reflective elements which sparkle in the sunlight, inflatable signs, and tethered balloons over 24 inches in diameter.
Does that include digital signs?
Huh?
Does that include digital signs?
If they're flashing and animated and have moving parts and whatnot. I mean, we allow signs to be,
Like LED illuminated,
for the
as
gas
long as they're not
stations.
moving.
So like on the Chicopee Curve, as you're coming around, there's a big billboard there that's a full digital sign. If someone had a small version of that, that would be prohibited according to this because it's animated, there's actual video in it, and it's moving, even if it's rotating between
we
stills.
could even call that out even more specifically if we wanted to in terms of billboards or something like that.
Right.
Well, I mean, like the one, I think there's one or two in town, even like it says open and it's got like the lights that move around the outside.
Right.
I think technically even under our existing one, those aren't allowed, but it's like that kind of I think that's the thing we're trying to avoid, is like the moving stuff that's gonna be distracting and.
To a driver. It's a safety thing, is the idea behind it. We'll hold. Okay? Any sign designed to be transported by means of wheels, and signs attached to or painted on vehicles parked invisible from a street or right-of-way customarily used by the general public, unless said vehicle is registered and used as a vehicle in the normal day-to-day operations of the business. So, for instance, this is something that drives me nuts. It's in Hadley. I don't know if it's still there anymore, but there was a Subway. There's like a little plaza. There's a RMV, or there used to be an RMV in there, and I think it's where Zoe's
was, and
was.
there's a Sears,
And
right?
there's in Sears, and there was a Subway sort of in that plaza, and they used to have a huge Subway truck that they would back in and park right there on the edge of the parking lot, and they would just leave it there,
Right.
and that was essentially their sign. To let
There's
people know
one,
that
there's
they-
one in Worcester where they got around a sign ordinance by doing that. They have a parking lot and a big truck that says parking here, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this doesn't prohibit you from regularly driving a banana-shaped car with a label for your, banana
No,
store.
if you're, as long as you're driving it around town. If you want to drive the Oscar,
Or even
Oscar Mayer
parking
Wiener
your
car around
tandem
town.
bagel delivery vehicle in your
Right.
parking lot like that, it's not.
And food trucks should be fine because they're coming and going from events, so they're utilizing that. That's.
Right.
I'm just concerned about a business that would just park a truck with their logo on it and just leave it in their parking lot and never move it. That's what I was trying to get at.
That'll be more of a permanent sign.
Slight grammar error, vehicles is registered,
Vehicles.
unless said vehicles are registered or
registered.
vehicle is
Yep.
registered.
Okay. So promotional beacons, laser lights or images, audible signs, temporary or permanent feather banners. So this goes, if you go to the definitions section, there's occasionally you'll see some businesses here in town, they have the large, and then we can put a picture in here, which could be helpful, but they're in the shape of a feather, and they just
Right.
say open, or
And they
sale,
just keep fluttering.
and they just, you know what I'm talking about?
And what's the problem with those?
I think they're distracting personally and not very aesthetically pleasing on a personal level, but, so I did see that in a couple other examples, is prohibiting those types of banners.
Yeah.
Again, it's just something to think about. We don't have to have it, but I'm throwing it in there for a conversation.
Yeah.
If it's not in there, people won't think to discuss it, so probably best to leave it in.
I don't have anything against feather banners, but it doesn't matter to me either.
I agree.
I mean, I guess in theory, we're gonna be regulating the size of signs and the total amount of signage for a specific business.
So maybe it's not worth
It may
having.
get, I mean, this is where it kinda gets hard that we put all that stuff to the end, because maybe it's not, I mean, maybe it's like if someone wants to use like 8 of their 12 square feet of signage on a big red open feather banner,
That'll use a lot.
right, like, but I don't know.
The example that I'm thinking of that uses a lot of them is Triple C Farm Stand, which is also an agricultural use.
Mm.
But they have like a whole row of them on East Street.
Mm.
How do you feel about it?
Doesn't bother me. I mean, I drive past it every day. It doesn't bother me.
I guess we
It's
can
amusing.
mark it.
So I'll just make a note that it could be addressed by signage amount
Okay.
and size. Okay, signs mounted or located on a tree, utility poles, or other similar structure. That might help with the singles signs that get put through a community on the utility poles overnight
Yeah.
when we're
What
all
about
sleeping.
all the tag sales signs, stuff like
Oh,
that?
yeah, tag sale signs too, so,
I think the city actually
Solar
produces some of
signs,
those, don't they?
garage sales,
They
all
did at
that
one
stuff.
point, maybe they don't anymore.
for what?
You used to be able to go and pay $5 for your permit for a tag sale, maybe it's more now.
Well, you
still
can, but
there.
it's putting the signs on the utility poles, which you don't own and I don't
Yeah.
own, that's owned by the utility company or the city, so it's, somebody's basically putting a sign on city-owned property or
still have-
utility-owned property.
You
I
still
think
have
the,
to pay
the singles
fines
thing is
for
not even
noise.
worth considering and doing any of this, because they don't
$5
care.
fine.
It doesn't matter.
But then it gives somebody the ability to just go remove them. too, 'cause it's- I mean, that's the
boy.
thing, it's the enforcement aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Problematic.
You have to have someone drive around.
Abandoned signs identifying abandoned or discontinued businesses, which is defined, abandoned.
About that a bit last time, right?
So I threw a sample definition in there. Any sign associated with a use which has ceased operation for no less than 2 years and/or contains or exhibits broken panels, visible rust, visible rot, damaged support structures, or missing letters, or which is otherwise dilapidated, unsightly, or unkempt. So we have a 2 years, which is really long in comparison to other communities. Other communities have like 90 days, which seems super short too. So I don't,
Maybe go
again,
1
just a
year.
note.
Does
that-
this mean, however, because of the or, the
If-
possibility that if you're missing a letter for 1 day, that you are considered abandoned?
No, but I think what we need is like, after the or, something about like, and, fails to, I mean, someone's gonna have to notify them that this qualifies, right? Because I would imagine there's visible rust on a large number of signs in East Hampton today, and it's not like an eyesore sign, but it's just there.
Also, visible rust, like there's very trendy right now are signs that are made
That's
out of
true, right?
rusty laser cut metal, so it's
Right.
something to consider.
Okay, so
Non-stylish rust?
hold to review and consider.
Yeah, there's gotta be something with like notice and failure to,
Well, we do have a whole abandoned section.
right, we talked about that.
Which is coming up.
I mean, the risk with the abandoned, right, is that if you abandon a pre-existing non-conforming sign, you're gonna lose the ability to rebuild it, right? So like, even if it's something minimal that seems really easy, like, oh, you know what, like if it becomes abandoned, you'll just rebuild your sign, but if it's like the Big E's sign or something like that, and you get a notice that it's been considered abandoned, then you can't rebuild a non.
You have to then conform to
You
zoning.
have to then conform, right, so like, that's the risk, I think, for whether you're doing it too quick or too slow.
Is there like
Right.
an option for curing?
Well, that's what's not in here, is it just says like if it has these characteristics. I mean, the not being in business for less than 2 years is easy to figure, well, not easy, but I think you can tell within a margin of error. But the part where it exhibits broken panels, visible rust, rot, that kind of thing,
I think there should be an option for I mean, some time.
that's what I'm wondering is if we need, but then it's, I mean, somebody's gotta be on that
Enforce, yeah.
and notifying them.
Plus, you know, you're talking about too, with some of that, with it rust and panels missing, you're talking about a safety issue too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Have we had this abandoned sign thing in East Hampton for a while?
You mean in the existing ordinance?
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in here.
And who enforces that?
Nobody.
Does
I don't know.
Northampton not have something like that in their sign ordinance? Have you?
Abandonment. If a non-conforming sign associated with a permanent use of structure or structure has been abandoned for no less than 2 years, i.e. the structure has not been occupied for 2 years, then the non-conforming sign shall be removed and its non-conformity shall not continue. So it's, right now it's tied to non-conforming signs. It's not tied to conforming signs.
So who's the one that does the dirty deed?
Hmm?
Who's the one that enforces this thing?
The building commissioner is currently the enforcer of everything in the sign ordinance. They're the ones who grant the permits and
we
they're
got
the
a sign
ones.
right here, I keep pointing out right here on Union Street. It's been that way for the last 20 years.
Right.
So how come it hasn't been enforced?
I don't think we have an abandonment in terms of signs that conform. I think we have abandonment
Right.
of signs that don't conform. Now, the question is, does
Oh.
that sign conform or not conform?
Oh, my.
I
You gotta
think,
find the
but the
loophole.
way that this is now drafted is that if it's been abandoned for more than 2 years,
Yeah, no.
it's
That
gotta
sign,
go.
it should have come down, but it hasn't.
So,
It's,
Didn't we also have the thing about like the safety issues or something?
where?
Wasn't that one of the reasons for a
We have a
permit
whole
to be
abandoned signs
revoked?
section that's basically lifted from this, that talks about non-conforming signs. It doesn't talk about conforming signs. And I have to admit, I don't remember if we had a discussion about conforming signs, and if so, what our decision was.
Okay, so we haven't read ahead to the maintenance and removal part, but what you're saying is that there is a cure period for violations, but it doesn't currently apply.
I think we talked about that before, right?
Oh, last time.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. So, but that doesn't
Yeah.
apply to the abandoned.
Any sign that endangers the public. Materially, electrically, or structurally defective sign. So it's not quite ones that are like in disrepair, but when it becomes a safety issue, then we have the authority in here to order that it be fixed. And if it's not fixed, I think we said in 20 days.
right.
That can be ordered taken down.
Mm-hmm. Although the building inspector just wants to, if you saw his email, I
Yeah.
forwarded it to you, correct?
Yeah, he
Um,
replied to everybody, I think.
Okay, so, right, he did. So I don't think he currently likes what's drafted right now. My indication was that he just wants to have the ability to go and take a sign down without having to notify them.
Right.
I don't know if you follow social media, but there has been a big hubbub on one of the East Hampton pages about
Yes.
signage removal.
I did
So,
see that.
Yep.
So I think there's various opinion on
Yeah.
how it needs to be handled, on whether there should be notification or not. And it, I mean, from an administrative standpoint, if that's adding additional workload onto him, if he's got to notify rather than just go and be able to take it down. I think that's what he's looking for, is that efficiency in the work process. But is that an equitable
That's a
way to be
lot of-
dealing with?
That's also a lot of unilateral power to give to
Yeah.
someone who you don't even know who's necessarily gonna be in that position in the future, so however much you,
So maybe there's a happy medium when
Some
we,
guy come down to rip off your sign. I mean, that doesn't make
right,
any
you
sense
show
to
up
me.
Monday morning and it's gone.
No, there should be some kind of notification.
I think it could be a liability issue for the city too, if signs are just getting removed and destroyed without notice.
Well, you have
Even
to
if
have
it says so in
notice.
the ordinance.
I do think there's
I
some
don't
due
know, I think
process
this is,
issues.
I think this is a
Yeah.
very controversial topic.
Yeah.
And I think needs some additional thought to it and public input to it on what that process should be. We need to balance both sides. We have to make sure that we're not overburdening a department that already has a lot on their plate versus providing fair, equitable process for businesses and homeowners in the city. So
Yeah, I think we
there's
need
gotta
to-
be a happy medium somewhere.
I think there has to be some kind of process involved, just because I think you run into sort of constitutional due process issues
Yeah.
with that, if you're just taking stuff.
I I don't believe you can just take it. If it's demeaning or something like that, then you can go and take it, but
So maybe the maintenance and removal section could have something added to this
who knows?
hazard to public health, safety, or welfare to say, or fits the definition
Put
of
the sign down right away.
abandoned,
Immediately.
or something like that, so that
I think the
the,
abandoned part is supposed to fit into that public
It
health,
does.
safety, welfare,
Okay.
because if it seems like it's a public health issue, or it's a sign that, I know that rust is cool, but if it's gonna fall off its hinges and hit somebody as
Right.
somebody's walking by.
but what if
then
it's just
that's-
like a missing letter?
Missing letter, I mean, then we're talking
Like the
about.
Calvin
Yeah, we're
Theater.
talking about the Calvin Theater
That's
in
what I'm talking
Northampton,
about,
so.
yeah.
You know, but there is, I mean, but there's a lot of help up about that.
Right.
And that's more of an aesthetics issue and what kind of message that sends. Really a safety issue there, unless somebody's trying to convey important information and lack of those letters causes a miscommunication. That's the only thing I can think about, but,
Yeah,
um,
well, that's a whole other conversation, but,
You can have an escort place. We have-
it would be nice if there was a way to
we have the guy
anticipate,
for
you know, a cure for that kind of situation, I guess.
Transgender, doesn't matter.
So we don't have a beer named after a dilapidated sign in our town.
People wear neither.
okay. So there's agreement on the board that there should be some level of due process in signage removal,
My headache's getting worse.
but it's unclear on whether this is the process that needs to happen. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yeah, and I think what we talked about before, can't you appeal the building commissioner's decisions to the ZBA, or is that just for a denial of a permit?
We talked about it, how there's the basic appeal process that's standard for any
Right.
decision from the building
I
inspector.
mean, I think that's the thing where you get into some oversight of, if you have sort of a broad definition of what the building commissioner can order a sign repaired or removed
Yeah.
for, like, at least to then have the ability to go to the ZBA and say, like, this is a letter that's missing, or this is some quirky, cool fake rust we have, but it's not a safety issue, or whatever.
One would hope that when they receive the letter from the building commissioner, that they would just come to talk to the building commissioner and maybe it could get resolved rather than having to go to the ZBA for an appeal.
Right, but I mean, I'm imagining, I mean, if you're giving sort of broad discretion to one individual, you're imagining the sort of nightmare scenario where someone in a future position is abusing that power. And having some sort of oversight so that it's not just a matter of, well, Jessica gets to determine whether this is a
Right.
safety thing, and she says it's a safety thing.
Right,
Your sign has to come down.
right.
You need a definition of immediate material hazard, which should be the only case in which they have that.
Well, or at least just clarify the sort of appeal period thing, or appeal process for that too, so that's included, so we can at least.
Yeah.
Another idea that I've seen in other contexts is maybe the due process issue and the building inspector's request could be resolved by allowing for the immediate removal of the sign, but a post-deprivation hearing of some kind. So you could take the sign when you go, when he goes, but then the owner of, he doesn't destroy it. The
No,
owner
and
of the
that's what
sign.
happens now with some signs that are in violation, that he may take it and then he stores it until it gets hashed out, whether
Right.
either in his
But like,
office.
imagine a larger or more complicated sign where you're gonna invest hundreds of dollars just to remove it and store it somewhere.
Right.
Well, that's the
that-
thing, is
But
that this
that's
is
up to
more
the-
for
his
temporary, these are
discretion.
Right.
mostly for temporary signs, I would
It's
say,
easy to
like,
fold up a sandwich board and bring it to the building commissioner's
Right.
office, but it's a lot harder if it's like a
Attached
bulb
to your
that's out in the
building.
Big East like sign in there. I
Right.
always pick the Big East sign,
But-
it's just a big one that pops into my head. But
I don't know if there could be, or
They're
like
always
some,
missing a
whatever.
bulb.
It's just an idea for the yard sign specific issue, because his concern is if it can stay up for 20 days, that's 20 days of free advertising, so people will just keep doing it. So, which I think is a valid concern.
maybe instead of going to 20 days, it goes to 7 days. Maybe it's 1 week.
Right.
If the sign's not down in 1 week,
Yeah.
then it's gotta be removed or something. I don't know.
or something with fines or bonds or something like that. I know
Could do,
he doesn't
yeah.
seem to be a fan of the fines, but I don't know what
Sometimes
authority
the
he has right
fines-
now.
Sometimes the fines in some areas are needed. You know?
Well, and if you have the discretion where it's something that's clearly malicious,
That's what I mean.
I don't know.
Difficult call.
Okay, so do I just leave this section as is for now and just make a note saying
So,
Board agrees that there has to be some level of due process, still need to work out the details? Like,
Yeah.
is that, do I just leave it
Yeah.
at?
sounds like it should be.
Okay. And then I think in the back, that was all
Mhm.
folded stuff. I did add the substitution clause, which is a big First Amendment thing. So, non-commercial signs are allowed in all zoning districts and may be substituted for any sign expressly allowed under this section. So, to understand that what we're basically regulating is commercial signage.
Right.
And that you're not gonna limit somebody's free speech if they wanna
I
substitute.
thought that was exactly what we couldn't do.
Mm.
How do you determine what's a commercial sign versus what's a
Free-
Donald Trump sign?
I think we could probably create a definition for it, but that, in all the materials that I've read for the post-read, they've all said you must have a substitution clause put in, like, that's like the key piece.
For what? I can't find where you're.
It's it's under miscellaneous,
Very last page.
Oh, okay.
last thing. So in all of the Reed Gilbert, like guidance documents that I'm coming across, multiple entities have said you need to have the substitution clause in there. I don't think we have to figure out how to define commercial message.
Yeah.
How to define commercial and not violate.
I mean, I
content.
thought, based on Reed, we're really just able to regulate the location and the size of all signs.
I can find the stuff
I
that
mean,
I.
you're not regulating
found.
content if you are dictating the owner. I mean, in this case, you're saying that it has to be, a commercial would be by a business compared to by an individual, and there's your definition, right? DBA, corporation, LLC, that's commercial. If it's not
Well,
owned by
except
a
it-
business, it's owned by an individual, then it's not
Well, except
commercial,
that
right?
both
No.
those can, I mean, a business could have non-commercial speech rights,
Right.
and an individual could have commercial signage.
But we're not regulating the content, we're just saying the ownership.
So the only difference might be a home-based business, but it's still a business because they still have to get a business certificate through the city.
Right.
In
Or
order
a
to-
business that has non-commercial, I mean, businesses have non-commercial speech rights too, so I mean,
Right.
a business is entitled to put up signs
Right,
for
and they
non-commercial
also
reasons,
have,
and if it's a sign just based on who owns the
I see what you're
property.
saying.
right.
Okay.
What about the businesses that you drive through town and they got real nice signs and they're right on their front lawns? You regulate those too?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
Well, there's, where is it? There's a sign on Park Street, I think, that there's a person that does crafts, and there's a nice sign that he's a craftsman, does,
Right, so he's a home-based business and currently
right,
has
and he
a
has a
certain,
sign out
Yep.
front, and is that gonna be,
well, that's a commercial business because he's running a business
right,
out
but
of
do
his
we
house.
regulate the size of the sign,
Yes,
or?
and we will based on the zoning district. So if it's, most home-based businesses are gonna be in residential zones, so we can.
Right, because some of those signs get a little carried away.
But this substitution clause doesn't allow unlimited non-commercial speech, it just means you can use it in the same way, you can have a sign the same way you could for a commercial one. So it's still restricted the same way, right? Because it just says non-commercial signs are allowed in all zoning substituted for any sign expressly allowed under this section. So if you're allowed to have a 3-foot by 6-foot sign for my tractor repair company, I can also have one for non-commercial.
That has
Instead
your
of that.
personal message that says God is love or
Right.
whatever.
Right, yeah.
But not, but so it's still not content based. It's still
No.
just the sign.
Right.
It's not commercial or non-commercial. It's, you're only allowed a 3-foot by 6-foot sign. You can either advertise your deli.
So you're asking whether this is even necessary is sort of what.
No,
you're
I'm just, it's not what I thought it was originally. It's not saying that it's not, that non-commercial speech is permissible in excess or in lieu of. It's only.
You can just
it's-
substitute a non-commercial.
Yeah,
sign.
your sign doesn't have to have a commercial purpose. That makes sense.
And that's it for tonight.
Really?
Good work. It's a lot of new stuff you put in there.
I have to say, those 3 sections took me to write.
You can tell by how difficult it is just to discuss and how many alternative options for everything there are.
I know.
It's
And if
really
there's
heavy.
something that pops into your head that you feel like is missing from those sections and you feel like that needs to be added, let me know and we'll put it in there and discuss it. I'm sure I'm missing so much as I'm drafting this. I can't think of every scenario.
No.
So, all right, so we have a lot of comments, we don't have any resolution, and I think I'm gonna start getting into the actual design
Actual
standards.
sign stuff.
Oh, I haven't got to public property.
That's
So-
what I was saying.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I need a little guidance on, is that most other examples that I'm looking at as I'm drafting this have very little language regarding signage on private property, or on public property. When the East Hampton ordinance was revamped, that was kind of the crux of the whole issue at the time, was regulating signage on public property, specifically sidewalk
Yeah.
signs and A-frame signs. So, so I'm not sure where to go with this, because our current ordinance is pretty substantial in regards to that. But most examples I'm looking at have very little language in regards to signage on public property. So do you want me to take what's existing and put it in there? And,
Are they not addressing it because they're just prohibiting it generally, or is it?
or allowing it?
or
I mean, now
allowing
the
it?
way that I have it currently written is that
Yeah.
we can put whatever sign we need to on public property. But the question had to do with, I think, private entities posting on public property. So at the time that the last signage ordinance was written, for example, before the boardwalk, there was the fence and there was a lot of banners and
Right.
sort of things that were being placed, and that's technically city property. There's the Rotary area
Right.
that I think, some signage was being posted on, and that's public property.
I mean, I think
So-
we can treat those areas differently, right? Like, I don't think we want signs on the boardwalk. Maybe we do or don't want it on the Rotary. I think on the sidewalks, it's a different issue, right? Like, if you have a business.
But the sidewalks are split down the middle, so the sidewalk, the property line for most of downtown is that the business owns to sort of the middle of the sidewalk, and then the city owns the other side.
Right.
So they can do whatever they want sort of on their side of the sidewalk, and that's why, you know, some of the coffee shops might have some chairs or a table sitting out there, because they regulate that zone, and we regulate sort of the outside of the sidewalk in terms of the city ownership.
To me, this category of thing seems similar to the prohibition on signs mounted or located on a tree, utility poles, or other similar structure. Like, they're both getting at the same thing, which is putting signs on things you don't own. So maybe they.
It's a little different, right? Because at least like the public property, like, we all kind of collectively own it, as opposed
Right.
to just being like a N-Star telephone pole. But
Right.
I mean, I think that it really is like a global decision. Like, do we want a process where I mean, some towns have processes for approval of signs that go on a town rotary, and there may or may not be a fee, but there's approval of the language and the layout, and it stays for a certain number of days. I mean, like, that's pretty cumbersome. I don't think the alternative of everybody does whatever they want for signs on the rotary is very palatable, but.
And the alternative are your A-frames that are like Mount Tom's Ice Cream or something right out in front of the galleries or something like that.
As
where
long as they stay on their own
Well, it
side of
sounds
the
like,
sidewalk.
yeah,
it's-
they're
Yes, they
side.
stay on
And
their
there's
side
a,
of the
there's a
sidewalk.
process for sandwich boards currently, and there's I think it's a different fee structure depending on whether you own the property or whether you're a tenant in the property, and you have to produce a letter from the property owner showing that you have permission to put that sign up.
What about the sandwich boards that will be put, say he wants to have his business and he takes a couple of people and gets these sandwich boards and they walk around town with them?
You know, I actually
Advertising.
had in the prohibited signs, I had it for a small, it wasn't sandwich board, but it was more dealing with the, you know, like during tax season, the people dress up and
The arrow
Right.
waiver guys.
livery, and they're
yeah.
like out in the street and they're dancing and stuff.
Right.
So I had found example of that's specifically prohibited. It says something like people wearing costumes and holding signs.
Oh,
How do you,
But I was like, oh,
That's
good
awesome.
God, like,
that's
you know,
such
just.
a slippery slope.
I
right?
know, exactly, which is why I took it out, but I find those distracting when I'm driving, but.
But
Who
how do you
doesn't
get?
look?
But how do you get rid of that and not get rid of the people that are standing at the top of Mount Tom on election day?
right.
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 The only way you do is by looking. Is it Liberty Tax or is it Bernie Sanders?
Right,
Hmm.
right. So that was the other, so again, something to
I had
think
to
about.
bring that up because I saw it in Springfield the other day.
I'm sort of toast, you guys.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah.
I think we.
I think the tape
reached-
turned off 20 minutes ago, so.
Did it?
We only get 2 hours.
Can I get a motion
Okay.
to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I'll go get the video.